Welcome to the Country Watch Political Intelligence Briefing Quick Hits, a weekly briefing of hot stories across the world in brief. I'm Denise Youngblood-Coleman, and I'm the Editor-in-Chief and Senior International Affairs Analyst at Country Watch. This week, I'm covering Israel as the featured country, where the eight-party anti-Netanyahu opposition bloc has united to form a new government. Under the terms of the agreement, Naftali Bennett of Yamina would lead the power-sharing government as Israel's next prime minister. The rotating prime ministership meant that Bennett would be succeeded by Yair Lapid of Yesh Atid as prime minister. Lapid, the orchestrator of the unity government, presented his proposal to President Reuven Rivlin on May 31st. In response, outgoing Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu lashed out in fury, calling the unity government the fraud of the century. Desperate to hold on to power, Netanyahu tried to coax Bennett and Gideon Sa'ar of New Hope into joining his bloc of ultra-Orthodox and religionist Zionist parties in forming a right-wing government. But this offer was rejected. The Israeli opposition parties had until June 2nd to finalize agreements to form a new government. Lapid, who leads Yesh Atid, had already concluded agreements with the center-left Labour Party, the left-wing Meretz Party, the centrist Blue and White Party, and the right-wing nationalist Yisrael Beitenu. But there were final accords yet to be reached with Bennett's right-wing Jewish nationalist Yamina Party, Sa'ar's right-wing New Hope, and Mansour Abbas's Al-Arab Islamist Ra'am Party. The reality was that the eight parties slated for the unity government had little in common save a desire to see the end of Netanyahu's leadership at the helm of Israel. Perhaps with that ultimate goal in mind, after all-night negotiations and with hours to spare, on June 2nd, Yair Lapid announced the government formation agreements had been reached successfully and he had a government in hand. Lapid formally informed President Reuven Rivlin of his success, saying, "I'm honored to inform you that I have managed to form a government." Lapid further committed to doing everything possible to unite and unify all sections of Israeli society. The new government would face a confidence vote in the Knesset on or before June 14th. If that vote failed to win the support of a majority of the 120-seat parliament, Israel would very likely face its fifth election in 2 years. In the interregnum, it was clear that Netanyahu would place ultimate pressure on all right-wing members of parliament to abandon the commitments of their respective parties and scuttle the incoming unity or change government. As noted by journalist Neri Zilber on Twitter, 7 to 12 days until government actually sworn in. Bibi will keep applying pressure on Yamina MKs to defect. It's his only remaining out. New era in Israel is close. The reality was that Lapid had managed thus far to do the unthinkable, link together disparate parties from the right, through the center, and to the left, including Jewish nationalists and the Arab Party in a unity government. Meanwhile, in related news in Israel, Isaac Herzog, the former leader of the center-left Labour Party, was set to become Israel's new president, succeeding outgoing President Reuven Rivlin. Following the vote for a largely ceremonial role, Rivlin congratulated his successor Herzog, saying, "I have no doubt you will do an excellent job, and I'm proud to pass the baton to you in a month." Across the world in the African country of Mali, there appeared to be a coup upon a coup unfolding. The country endured a coup d'etat 10 months prior, with a military junta headed by Assimi Goïta seizing power. A transitional government was established with transitional President Boad Ndoa and interim Prime Minister Mokhtar Ouani at the helm, and with the two leaders charged with returning the country to civilian rule. But in late May, Ndoa as well as Ouani were stripped of their powers. Goïta indicated that elections would be held in 2022, but that promise did little to assuage the international community. The United Nations, the African Union, the Economic Community of West African States, the European Union, and the United States issued a rare joint communique condemning the detention of Ndoa as well as Ouani and demanded that they be released. Moving on to the Pacific island nation of Samoa, parliamentary elections took place amid COVID-19 pandemic conditions in April. This election promised to be the most competitive in years for the dominant Human Rights Protection Party, or HRPP, led by the current Prime Minister Malele Goae, against the newly formed FAST Party. At the helm of FAST was Fiami Naomi Mataafa, daughter of Samoa's first prime minister and a former ally of President Malele Goae, who defected to the opposition party amid conflict over controversial legislation that critics said would undermine the constitution. Once the election tally was decided, it was clear that the country was headed for a political state of deadlock, with both major parties controlling 25 seats respectively, and the 51st seat won by an independent. At issue was the fact that the Electoral Commission added an extra parliamentary seat to meet a provision in the constitution that 10% of seats are reserved for women. That extra seat was appointed to the HRPP government, while the independent member of parliament threw their lot in with Mataafa and FAST, resulting with both parties holding 26 seats respectively and producing an impasse. A decision by the country's Supreme Court essentially threw out that extra parliamentary seat, meaning that FAST had a one-seat edge and the right to form a new government. A second decision by the Supreme Court overruled an attempt by the head of state to avoid the April election results. On May 24th, Fiame Naomi Mataafa was sworn in as Samoa's first female prime minister. Outgoing Prime Minister Malilagoya refused to cede power. In fact, his supporters locked the doors of Parliament. Undeterred, the swearing-in ceremony took place hours later outside under a tent. Mataafa herself is a stalwart of Samoan politics, and her family lineage is descended from the Tama'aiga Samoan royal lineage. Her grandfather helped draft the Samoan constitution, and her father was the country's first prime minister after independence. There are elections in Mexico and Iran coming up, so look out for coverage of that in the future. Also, Russia and the United States will hold their first face-to-face meetings in regard to Biden and Putin. They will, for the first time, be seen face-to-face, and there are certain benchmarks that we should be looking out for, so I'll be covering that as well. For more information about these and other stories, read my weekly political intelligence briefing and my coronavirus report, both of which are accessible from the front page of the Country Watch website at www.countrywatch.com. Thank you for your time, have a great day, and remember that we live in an interconnected world.